Welcome, Army fans. This is Joe Iacono with GoBlackKnights.com, along with one of our favorite guests of the program, repeat guest, been on a couple times last season, former linebacker and new dad from Indiana, Alex Aukerman. Alex, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. We really excited to have you here. Really, I think the fans really appreciate your analysis that you gave us a couple times last year. Really enjoyed having you on after the Air Force game. But we are wrapping up the summer, and believe it or not, I could be wrong. I think college football kicks off tonight, actually, which is crazy. Week zero. I know there's a couple games.
Yeah.
Big game this weekend is Georgia Tech, Florida State over in Ireland. For those of us down here in Atlanta, people will be paying close attention to that. A lot of Knowles and Georgia Tech grads down here in this area. And then next week, of course, is week one when everybody kicks off. Army has a Friday night kickoff against Patriot League FCS opponent Lehigh. Wanted to kind of bring the fans into your mindset as a former player. I know it was a couple of years ago, but you're still way younger than I am, so the memories haven't faded that much. But what was it like for you? Maybe the first time you knew you were going to be the starter in the opener at outside backer for Jay Bateman's defense. Might have been 2016 or 17. What was that feeling like? Kind of, what was it like the week leading up to the game? Thoughts, emotions, feelings, kind of give the fans a little insight to some of that.
Well, unfortunately, it was 2015, and the opener was against Fordham. So we also had an FCS opponent, um, and we were kind of coming off that our freshman season, which was Coach Monken's first year, where I think the majority of us kind of felt like we were a talented team and underperformed. Now that very first year, you can ask anybody on the team, like it was the transition from freshman year to senior year of how we did things varied greatly. And that freshman year was, survival of the fittest with everything from our conditioning to how long practices were to how much we hit. And I think, looking back, it really kind of set the standard and really just set the tone for the direction that Coach Monken wanted the program to go. Yeah, man, the freshman year was crazy. But my very first start, yeah, would have been Fordham, sophomore year. I it obviously did not go our way. We ended up getting our revenge on them the next time we played them, and made up for that. But they had some good players, some players that definitely were Division I FBS caliber. Chase Edmonds might even still be in the NFL. I know
Yeah,
he's
Chase Edmonds is a stud. I remember
yeah,
him.
he's there for a while. So he had a long career. And yeah, it was his game where I think we were all amped up. We were ready to kind of hit the ground running that 2015 season, and then the theme of the year was that we were just so close so many times. And I think we kind of talked about it as we transitioned from that year to the next year, but the process was basically like, you come out that first year and you lose big. The next year you lose, but the games are close, and then you kind of cross the chasm of like now you're winning close games and now you're, taking that next level. So I think it was just a part of the process, and I think, really in Coach Monken's mind, that was probably, of course he would want to win every single game, but I think that was kind of the blueprint that he had in his mind of, he's going to turn this program around one day at a time, and that's kind of how it ended up happening.
Yeah, I remember. It's funny you mentioned that because I remember Lou Holtz saying one time that there's like a progression to building a program, and it literally sounds like the Monken blueprint that he implemented at West Point, where first you have to learn how to win games, then you have to learn, or first you have to learn how to be competitive, then you have to learn how to win games, then you learn how to win championships. And then you learn how to maintain that level of excellence and repeat as champions, which is funny. If you look at your 4 years from 14 through 17, and then what the team was able to do in 18, going 11-2 and just smoking Houston in the bowl game. That kind of was that exact progression. And it was funny hearing you talk about your plebe year, on top of being a plebe. And let's kind of hover over that a little bit because I think that'd be an interesting conversation for people. So on top of being a plebe, just coming out of Beast and cadet basic training, which is hard enough and a shock to the system for anybody. And I can't remember if you were a prepster or not. You can kind of let people you weren't. So direct, even worse, direct admit. And going in the Beast and then coming out of Beast. And from the stories I've heard from guys like Terry Baggett and Larry Dixon, Coach Monken's practices may have been worse than Beast. And the level of hazing may have been worse for all I know. So, kind of talk about just what that stress level was like in 2014. Because Coach Monken and the coaches still have super high standards. They still hold these players today extremely accountable. But let's be honest, it's just different. So,
Yeah, I could probably talk about that era, just that year alone for an hour. There were some crazy days there. I wouldn't say there was any hazing, but the expectations from the previous coaching staff to the Monken staff was pretty dramatic. So like coming out of Beast, there's like a small little layover where it was like the first practice was maybe on Monday. Um, Everybody had to report by Sunday, but some of the guys were showing up like Friday, Saturday. So some of those guys you mentioned, like Larry and Terry Baggett, like we got to know those guys ahead of time. But when I was talking to some of the upperclassmen, they're like, "Oh, like you guys are so lucky you're out of Beast now. Like, oh, dude, camp, we have like Madden tournaments, NBA 2K, like we're watching movies, like it's just practice and then we hang out and then like that is not at all what happened. Like that freshman year camp was 100% way harder than Beast. And honestly, just personally, I had an absolutely terrible camp. Um, I was still playing safety, so I came in as a safety. I was playing
yeah, that's
safety.
right. How much did you weigh as a plebe? Because we like your weight
Uh,
gain's kind of legendary at the academy.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was in camp, I was still probably under 210.
Wow.
'Cause I lost some weight at Beast, but yeah, I think I was probably around 210, playing safety. And I mean, they should have pulled me way earlier, to be honest. Like Coach Bateman was giving me way too many chances, but he saw something in me, I guess. So he kept throwing me out there, but it shouldn't have been at safety. I gave up a long touchdown in the scrimmage to DeAndre Bell, missed the backside post. It was crazy. But yeah, I mean, everybody kind of knows like the whole standard was shifted. Like lights out used to be before Monken. It was like, hey, turn the lights off, and then everybody would be kind of hanging out doing stuff. Like with Coach Monken, it was literally eyes closed in your bed at this time, or like you're gonna pay for it. So, it's just things like that. Um, yeah, it was 100% harder than Beast, but and then I think going in from camp and then into the season, the practices were very long. So, we conditioned, I want to say every single day, maybe not Thursdays, but basically every single day. Had a hard conditioning day Monday, and then Tuesday, Wednesday practices were probably 30 minutes longer than they were by the time I was in senior year. And that's every day. Pads were worn way more. We were hitting way more. So, it really set the standard, but at the same time, like there were a lot of guys that were in blue jerseys and red jerseys, and it's just like you better figure it out. But yeah, so I mean, my first year, I think I got in 3 snaps on defense. One of them was against Ball State, and I got absolutely thrown on my back because I thought I had a free shot to the quarterback,
Um,
which would be pretty funny to if you could pull that one up on film. But yeah, not my brightest moment. And but yeah,
that was
as
your dad was a Ball State grad, wasn't he?
he was my dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, played at Ball State, and also in that game, I somehow beat instant replay. Don't tell them, but the punt definitely hit me. They recovered it, and then somehow on review they said it did not touch me, but it did. So That was a nice
That
little
was
break
see,
there.
that was bad karma. That came back to haunt us against Navy last year when that kid clearly took one off his
Yes.
foot and they
Yeah.
call
It's
it.
been waiting that whole time. But I would say like, I had gone to some college football games. I went to the Army Navy game in 2013, but I kind of like that first game. So I think we played Buffalo my freshman year. I maybe
Yeah,
got
I remember that. It was a win, which was
yeah, it
which was
was.
very unusual at the
It
time.
was. But I want to say like I was just on punt return. I wasn't, I really wasn't that nervous. It was nice to just kind of go out there and hit somebody else. But yeah, it was just, it's crazy just to become a college football player. I just remember like in my mind I want to do it for so long, and then like that first kickoff goes off and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like here we go." And everything's just going. The game is so fast, at least it was for me as a freshman. Like everything would just felt like it was so fast. And I think my second or third games at Stanford, and I think I was on punt at that point, and I was just getting ragdolled. Like it was so bad. I'm like, okay, now this is college football. Like the things I was doing against Buffalo, I could not get away, when we were playing at Stanford.
Against
So,
Stanford. Was Harbaugh still at Stanford then?
I don't know,
Or was
but
that
they,
Shaw?
they had a really talented team. Barry Sanders Jr. was the starting running back. They had Ty
Wow.
Montgomery. They had big tight end that is probably still in the NFL. Austin Hooper was one of them. He was their second tight end. But yeah, Blake Martinez was a guy I had to block who he like just left the NFL, and yeah,
Yeah.
he made me look silly. So, that was also getting that experience as a freshman was pretty valuable. Learning how to travel, just the expectations there. And later on when I was a sophomore, now it's like Kenneth Brenson's rooming with me. I can kind of show him the way. So even when you're not getting that many snaps, it's still very valuable just to know how to prepare, how to watch film, staying engaged with your guys. It was a really exciting time as a freshman, and honestly later on in my career, I'd always kind of be jealous of like the freshman guys because I'm like they're not worried about anything at all. And then like my senior year, it's like, oh my gosh, if I don't play amazing, like I'm gonna hear about it so much in film and all that stuff. And it's like, oh, that dude's traveling, enjoying life, and he's just like has 3 snaps on punt. And I was like, I remember those days. Those are great days.
You're
Yeah.
basically traveling and watching most of the
And
games.
yeah, getting out of plebe responsibilities, and you're just like, this
Right.
is amazing. You finally get some sleep for the first time. So yeah.
That's pretty wild. And then, as you said, you started your sophomore year, your yuck year against Fordham in the opener, and was a close loss. I think that was the year Army was learning how to compete and win for sure. Like you said, maybe one of the best 2-10 teams of all time. You guys went into Happy Valley and really had them. Was that I don't remember if Barkley Saquon was on that team or not, but
He was. He was a freshman, but I think that might have been the only game he missed in his college career. He did not play that game. But I think their backup
okay.
running back was like Miles Sanders. So it's not like they had like a crazy drop off.
Right.
They,
Yeah. But
they
you
definitely
guys,
still
I
had some
mean, if it
drive.
weren't for 7 turnovers, Army
Yeah.
probably walks away with a win that day.
Yep.
Um, and the Fordham game, I mean, so we talked about it, right? Army's opening with an FCS team next week in Lehigh. As you mentioned, Fordham was super talented. Uh, Edmonds and they had a really good quarterback, and Joe Moore was their head coach, who ended up becoming the OC at Penn State. And I think he's still bouncing around somewhere as an OC, really talented offensive mind. What do you think was like what caused it was a close loss, but what do you think was the problem in that game for you guys? Was it just you weren't quite ready yet to get over the hump? Too many fundamental errors? Were you just was it like I hate the term overconfidence, but did you underestimate Fordham at all? I don't
Um,
know.
well, I would say one thing is at least on the defensive side of the ball, we had a lot of new faces that sophomore year. Now that ended up doing us really well, the following year. It was basically the same for linebackers the next year. There were a lot of overlap, but I mean, that sophomore year, it was a lot of new faces everywhere. So I think, when that happens, there's just more missed assignments, you give away some of those easy plays, or even if you're a more talented team, that if you just let a guy go loose right up the middle and catch a wide open touchdown, like it really doesn't matter. So I remember just we had a lot of missed assignments. Like our effort was actually a little better than you would think. It's not like we were out there not trying hard, but it was just people were in the wrong spot. And it wasn't like I think my freshman year, one of the big things was they instilled in us kind of like the do your job mentality. Like there were a lot of guys out there. I think we probably had a more talented team my freshman year than our sophomore
Yeah,
year.
that was right. I think that was it was funny, the kind of overly emotional fans who there was actually I love bringing this up just to kind of rub it in people's faces because I'm from New Jersey and I keep receipts. But there was after that first year there was actually a Fire Jeff Monken website which I thought was hilarious
After
and
one year.
and it was because the team everybody was like, oh my gosh, these guys were so good in 2013 and like they only finished 4-8. Like that was a really talented team, but things
Yeah,
happen.
I mean, yeah. So I think like there was an issue of like people trying to make plays, getting in the wrong gaps. And I mean, I just know it would drive like the defensive staff crazy. Like, why are you here? They're like, well, I saw the guy like running there, and it's like, well, that's not your gap. Like
That's
that's
not your job.
the backer's gap. And that's why the dude ended up cutting, into the gap that you were supposed to be in. So, there's kind of stuff like that. Our freshman year. So even though we were more talented, it those were just kind of like issues that would pop up. And then
Yeah,
sophomore year, I think we slowly got better as the year went on, but yeah, at that time I just think it was a lack of experience. We weren't able to finish those games, but like it was like at the end of the year, like we couldn't believe that we went 2-10 because it just felt like we were starting to turn a corner. Like it was like we had all this momentum, even though the record we dropped two more games that following year. So I think that next off season everybody really locked in. Kind of knew that like if we can't win more than two games our junior year, like this is going to be a real rough
problem.
go
Yeah.
here. We started putting some wins together and the confidence
So
kind of
2016 starts off. Now you're a cow. You're a little bigger. You're playing outside backer. And yeah, the team really had a nice, that was really the first winning season. Beat Navy, go to a bowl game, really the first turnaround kind of season where the results showed it. I mean, I think anybody with eyes to see could see that in 2015 you guys were getting better. There were just too many mistakes, and maybe that was because of the youth of the team a little bit, like you had mentioned. But in 16, clearly you guys had turned a corner. And it started opening night down in Philly against a pretty good Temple team that ended up winning the American Athletic Conference and beating Navy in the conference championship. Um, and so I don't know how much you remember about that game specifically, but talk about, I think that was, as we like to say in the media, that was Army's coming out party, kind of.
Yeah. No, that was a really big game. For sure. They were a really good team. I remember Matt Rule was the coach.
Yep.
He was walking around laps with his big old silver chain, and I was just like, this guy. Like we were really hyped up. Because one, like I remember the opening line came out and they were, I think, 10.5 point favorites. Like they were projected to beat us really bad. We felt like we were just, we were good enough to beat them. Um, so yeah, we really just were clicking on all cylinders in that game, and that was kind of like the spark of like, all right, we know how to win. Like now we just got to go out and kind of execute. So yeah, that was a great game. And yeah, it was one of a very fond win of my career for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great, like, I think for the whole Army fan base, they were like, okay, this is the real deal. Like I remember my biggest takeaway from that game, like I was like, okay, the defense is good. Like especially pass defense. That's surprising, right? Because it's always been with Army, it's always been stop the run and
Yeah.
you just hope you can stop the pass. But you guys did a really good job against the pass that game too, I thought. But my biggest takeaway was the fullback play, right? Because it's like in Coach Monken's offense, you have to have a good fullback. And Andy Davidson, Darnell didn't really play as much that game, but you could tell I was like, okay, they've got some guys now at fullback.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
So we got a couple minutes left, Alex.
All
Talking
right.
about the 2024 team. Um, as they get ready to open on Friday night against Lehigh. First year in a conference in a really long time as they go into the American Athletic Conference. There's a lot of games that I think, if you look at on paper, could be considered 50-50 games. And with the transfer portal now, who knows what's what, right? Like you look at Rice and you go, okay, but they've got EJ Warner now, who was Kurt Warner's son, who was the QB at Temple. And so that all of a sudden becomes a much tougher game. Florida Atlantic brought in a lot of transfers. So going into the season, Army returns a lot of talent on offense, which is really, really good. Defensively, they're very young, but Coach Woody thinks this may be actually his deepest defense, and he may be able to rotate out a lot of guys on the ones and twos. So, kind of, what are your thoughts about the Army team from what you know about it, this coming season, and maybe, any predictions on what you expect to see? I guess the other big news blast around that is going back to more of a traditional under center option with Cody Worley taking over the offense.
Yeah, I mean, it would be exciting to watch. The being in a conference obviously is completely foreign to me. Um, I mean, I know they have Notre Dame this year. Again, that was a familiar foe
Yeah.
that also did not go our way. But I think it'll be good. Going back to the original kind of option, I think all the coaches are obviously going to be extremely comfortable with it. And obviously, if they have upperclassmen playing, then it'll be like riding a bike. They'll just hop back into it. So now the other teams having to prepare, looking at multiple year old film, like last year's film is probably not going to help them much if they're seeing a ton of shotgun snaps, and then you roll out the helmets on Saturday and everything's under
Yeah.
center. So that's going to help them early in the year, I think. Just from a scouting standpoint, that's going to make it difficult for those Lehigh, Florida Atlantic, those early opponents. So there's that. On defense, I mean, Nate Woody's done a really good job since he's been there. I really don't think they've ever had that much of an off year at all. And I think kind of that first year that he took over, people were expecting kind of a fall off.
Yeah.
Um, it really didn't happen. So. Yeah, I mean, I know he's going to get them right, and I've never talked to him or met him, but just from the product that I see on Saturdays, I think they'll be just fine. So, and
Yeah,
obviously
it's
they're
funny.
very
Him and
much,
Coach Bateman were both great DCs for two different reasons, I think. They both play somewhat similar Ds, but a little bit different philosophy for sure. Um, I noticed Coach Woody is much more, a little less blitz heavy, much more bend but don't break, I think, and the red zone D the last couple of years has just been lights out. I mean, when teams get down in the red zone, it's the 2 years ago. I remember towards the end of the year, I was like, we just need to let everybody go to the red zone and just
yeah.
like dial it up and stop them because it became impossible for people to score in the red zone. You're really knowledgeable about defensive football. And I'm not just saying that because you're my guest tonight. I mean, I'm hearing you talk, I always learn a ton about defensive football. From the Army games you've seen, what is it about Coach Woody's defense do you think that makes them so tough to score on, especially in the red zone?
Well, I mean, there's just a lot less space down there. It sounds very simple, but
Yeah,
I mean, when you're playing fast, it's really hard on offense. Because the defense isn't really going for fakes that much. Like they're just sprinting at everything. So you have to just think very fast. And if you can disguise them or confuse the offense by just a split second, then they're gonna make a rush throw, they're gonna get sacked, they're gonna do the wrong thing. So yeah, I mean that I loved playing red zone personally. just because there's no stopping and thinking. It's just, you go out
Go.
like the, there's no threat of a 80-yard touchdown.
Yeah,
So you're just
you don't have to worry about getting
it's such
beat
a
deep.
more
Yeah.
aggressive move, and yeah, it's almost you almost feel like, hey, if you have the C gap, it's like, no, I'm shooting the C gap. Like I'm not shuffling along the line. So uh,
Right.
yeah, red zone defense is definitely fun, despite like, yeah, you're probably gonna give up 3 points, so you don't want to be down there, but
Right.
in a vacuum, it's a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thanks a ton, Alex. We appreciate your time tonight. And look forward to hopefully having you on a few more times throughout the season for a little post-game analysis with us. If you're going to be at any games, just let me or Charles know ahead of time, and we can do some live stuff. And yeah, thanks a ton. Looking forward to the start of the season. Uh, Ladies and gentlemen, Army fans, this has been Joe Iacono with GoBlackKnights.com, along with former Army linebacker Alex Aukerman, saying Go Army, beat Navy. And now, I guess officially a couple days out, we can say beat Lehigh as well.